The alarm bells echoed through the massive halls of the Galactic Council station. Emergency lights flashed red across every corridor as representatives from hundreds of different worlds rushed toward the main assembly chamber. Some walked on two legs, others slithered or floated. A few rolled along the floor on wheels of bone. But despite their many differences, they all shared the same expression of pure terror. Ambassador Zephyrian of the Altarian Collective was the first to reach the podium. His blue skin had turned almost white with fear, and his forearm shook as he activated the holographic display. The image that appeared above the chamber made every creature in the room go silent. It was a fleet unlike anything seen in thousands of years. The ships were not made of metal or crystal like normal spacecraft. Instead, they were alive. Each vessel looked like a massive sea creature from some nightmare ocean. They were the size of small moons, with tentacles that stretched for miles and mouths that could swallow entire cities. Organic weapons grew from their sides like tumors, pulsing with dark energy. "The Devourer fleet has returned," Zephyrian said, his voice barely a whisper. "After 10,000 years of silence, they have come back." The chamber erupted in panic. Representatives screamed in their native languages. Some fainted. Others tried to run for the exits. The Crystalline Dominion's counselor, a being made of living diamond, began to crack under stress. Even the mighty war chiefs of the Orcanian Empire, known for their bravery in battle, cowered behind their stone tables. Everyone knew the stories. The Devourers were older than recorded history. They traveled through the dark spaces between galaxies, consuming everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire solar systems. Nothing could satisfy their hunger. The previous galactic civilization had been wiped out completely when the Devourers last visited. Only scattered ruins and ancient warnings remained from those times. "How many ships?" asked General Krex of the Reptilian Federation, his scales rattling with fear. "Our deep space sensors count at least 50,000 vessels," Zephyrian replied. "But they keep coming through the dark space portal. The actual number could be millions." The chamber fell silent again. 50,000 moon-sized bioships was already far beyond anything the current Galactic Council could fight. Millions would mean the end of all life in the galaxy. "Where are they heading?" whispered Counselor Vex, the crystalline being whose cracks were spreading wider. Zephyrian hesitated. His hands moved over the controls, zooming the display to show the fleet's trajectory. A bright line appeared, pointing directly toward one particular star system. The system was small, unimportant by galactic standards. It had only one inhabited world, populated by a primitive species that had barely learned to leave their home planet. "Sol System," Zephyrian announced. "They're heading straight for Earth." Some representatives looked confused. Earth was not a major world. The humans living there were newcomers to space travel. They had only recently developed nuclear weapons and basic chemical rockets. Most galactic civilizations had stopped paying attention to human progress years ago, dismissing them as another primitive species that would take thousands of years to become relevant. Why would the Devourers target such an unimportant world? Ask Commander Ulix of the Floating Cities. "It doesn't matter why," General Krex snapped. "What matters is that they're heading there first. We all know how the Devourers operate. They don't stop with one world. They consume everything in the system, then move on to the next. And the next. They won't stop until the entire galaxy is dead." The panic started again, but this time it was mixed with desperate planning. Representatives began shouting suggestions over each other. Some wanted to evacuate the human population before the Devourers arrived. Others suggested abandoning the Sol System entirely and focusing on defending more important worlds. A few even proposed surrendering immediately, hoping the Devourers might show mercy. "We have to save as many humans as possible," declared Ambassador Mylena of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. It's our duty as advanced civilizations to protect primitive species. Save them how? General Krex demanded. We have maybe 72 hours before the Devourer fleet reaches Earth. Our fastest ships can't evacuate more than a few thousand people in that time. The human population is over 8 billion. Then we save who we can, Mylena insisted. Scientists, artists, genetic samples. Enough to preserve their species for the future. The debate continued for hours. Plans were made and discarded. Evacuation ships were prepared. The Council's small military force was positioned at what they hoped would be safe distances, ready to document the destruction for historical records. No one seriously considered the possibility of fighting the Devourers. That was suicide. As the emergency session finally ended, Zephyrian remained at the podium, staring at the holographic display. The Devourer fleet was moving faster now, accelerating as it entered the outer edges of the Sol system. In just over 2 days, they would reach Earth. He activated his personal communicator and sent a message to the human governments on Earth. It was a simple warning, translated into all major human languages. The message explained what was coming and offered to evacuate as many people as possible. Zephyrian expected panic, desperate pleas for help. Or maybe just silence as the humans realized their doom. The response he received was not what he expected. "Thank you for the warning," came the reply from someone called Admiral Chun of something called Earth Solar Defense Force. The title confused Zephyrian. Humans didn't have a solar defense force as far as he knew. "We appreciate your offer of evacuation assistance, but we must decline. Earth will handle this situation." Zephyrian read the message 3 times, certain there had been a translation error. Humans couldn't possibly think they could fight the Devourers. It was impossible. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had never even tried to fight them. They just ran and hoped the Devourers would eventually leave. He sent another message, explaining more clearly what the Devourers were capable of. He attached historical records, images of destroyed worlds, casualty reports from the last Devourer invasion. He made it very clear that this was not a fight anyone could win. The human response was even shorter this time. "Understood. We'll handle it." Zephyrian stared at his communicator screen for a long moment. Then he activated the Council's emergency broadcast system. Every representative across the galaxy would need to know about this. The humans were refusing evacuation. They were going to try to fight Dot as word spread through the galactic community. The reaction was universal disbelief. Some thought the humans had misunderstood the situation. Others believed they were in shock and couldn't think clearly. A few suggested that human primitive brains simply couldn't process the level of threat they were facing. But as the Devourer fleet grew closer to Earth, one thing became clear. The humans weren't running. Instead, every human spacecraft in the solar system was moving in the wrong direction. They weren't fleeing toward the outer edges of their system to escape. They were heading inward toward Earth, as if gathering for something. The Galactic Council could only watch and wait. In less than 2 days, they would witness the end of another species. The only question was how long the humans would last before the inevitable end came. The outer edge of the Sol system began to die. Ambassador Zephyrian watched the sensor displays with growing horror as the Devourer fleet arrived exactly when predicted. The bioships emerged from dark space like nightmares becoming real. Their massive organic hulls blocked out the stars as they spread across the system's outer regions. The first target was Pluto. The small dwarf planet disappeared in less than an hour, consumed by 3 of the smaller Devourer ships. They literally ate it, breaking it apart with tentacles and feeding the chunks into massive mouths. The planet's mass was absorbed into the bioships, making them grow larger and stronger. Neptune is next, reported Sensor Officer Clinda, her voice shaking. 5 of the larger vessels are approaching it. The Galactic Council's observation ships maintain their positions far outside the Sol system, recording everything for the historical archives. This was how civilizations died. This was how the Devourers had destroyed the galaxy once before, and how they would destroy it again. Any word from the human governments? Asked General Krex. Zephyrian shook his head. Radio silence for the past 6 hours. Our evacuation ships are standing by, but they haven't sent any people to the pickup points we established. Maybe they're too panicked to respond, suggested Counselor Vex. The crystalline being had partially repaired himself, but stress fractures still ran through his diamond body. Or maybe they're already dead, General Krex said grimly. The Devourers might have sent advanced scouts to the inner planets, but the sensors told a different story. Earth was still very much alive. In fact, human activity had increased dramatically over the past day. Thousands of spacecraft were moving throughout the inner solar system. Most were small fighters and transport vessels, but the sensors also detected much larger ships that hadn't been there before. Where did those come from? Zephyrian asked, pointing to the display. Yesterday, the humans had maybe a dozen crewed spacecraft. Now I'm counting hundreds. Clinda adjusted her instruments, focusing on the new human vessels. I don't understand these readings, Ambassador. Some of these ships are broadcasting power signatures that rival our own warships. But that's impossible. Human technology is centuries behind ours. Check the sensor calibration, ordered General Krex. The readings must be wrong. While Clinda worked on the sensors, Neptune died. The Devourer ships surrounded the giant planet like antibodies attacking an infection. Massive tentacles pierced through the planet's atmosphere, draining away its gases. The solid core was cracked apart and devoured piece by piece. Sir, Clinda called out, her voice confused. The sensors are working perfectly. Those human ships really are putting out that much power. And there's something else. They're moving. The display updated to show the human fleet's movements. Every single human spacecraft was accelerating away from Earth and the inner planets. But they weren't fleeing outward toward empty space like any rational species would do. Instead, they were heading directly toward the Devourer fleet. That can't be right, Zephyrian said. Show me again. The trajectory lines appeared on the screen, clear and undeniable. The entire human fleet was on a collision course with the most dangerous force in galactic history. They're going to attack, whispered Counselor Vex. The humans think they can fight the Devourers. The council chamber erupted in shocked conversation. Representatives called out in dozens of languages, all expressing the same disbelief. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others felt sick, knowing they were about to witness a massacre. Zephyrian activated the emergency communication system and sent a direct message to Earth's military headquarters. Human Command, this is Ambassador Zephyrian of the Galactic Council. Your fleet is moving towards certain destruction. Please reconsider your course. We can still evacuate your essential personnel. The response came back quickly, spoken by the same Admiral Chun who had refused evacuation before. But now his voice was different. It was calm, professional, and completely confident. Ambassador, this is Admiral Chun of Earth's Solar Defense Force. We appreciate your concern, but evacuation won't be necessary. We have the situation under control. Under control? Zephyrian couldn't keep the shock out of his voice. Admiral, you're facing an enemy that has destroyed entire galactic civilizations. Your primitive weapons cannot possibly, with respect. Ambassador, Admiral Chun interrupted. Our weapons aren't as primitive as you think. And we're not facing this enemy. We're hunting it. The communication ended abruptly. Zephyrian stared at the console, trying to make sense of what he'd heard. Hunting? No one hunted the devourers. The concept was insane. "Sir, you need to see this," Clinda called out urgently. The main display zoomed in on the approaching human fleet. What Zephyrian saw made his blood freeze. The human ships weren't just moving toward the devourers. They were spreading out in formation, taking attack positions that showed clear military planning and coordination. "How many ships?" asked General Krex. "Initial count shows approximately 8,000 human vessels," Clinda reported. "But that number keeps growing. More ships are launching from hidden bases throughout the system." Hidden bases? Zephyrian felt reality shifting around him. What hidden bases? Our surveys showed humans only had basic settlements on a few worlds. Apparently our surveys were wrong, sir. I'm detecting major installations on Mars, several moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and in the asteroid belt. These aren't primitive outposts. They're full military complexes with shipyards, weapons factories, and defensive systems. The council representatives fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities. But why? And for how long? "Get me a closer scan of those human warships," ordered General Krex. "I want to know what we're really looking at." The display focused on the largest human vessel, a massive ship nearly 2 kilometers long. Its design was unlike anything in the galactic database. Instead of the smooth curves favored by most civilizations, it was angular and aggressive. Weapon ports covered its hull like scales on a predator. "Power readings are unprecedented," Clinda reported, her voice barely a whisper. "That ship is generating more energy than a council dreadnought. Its weapons systems are unlike anything in our records." "Where did they get that technology?" demanded Councillor Vex. "Sir," Clinda said, "I don't think they got it from anywhere. The design principles are completely foreign. This is human technology, but it's far more advanced than we thought possible." On the display, Uranus began to die as the Devourer fleet continued its advance. But something had changed. The bioships that had been moving in a steady consuming pattern suddenly slowed their advance. Long-range sensors detected increased activity among the Devourer vessels, as if they were communicating with each other. "They've noticed the human fleet," Zephyrian realized. "The Devourers know something is coming." For the first time in recorded history, the Devourer fleet had stopped consuming and started preparing for battle. Their bioships began to change formation, turning their massive forms to face the approaching human vessels. "Admiral," Chen's voice came over the communication system again. But this time, it was broadcast on all frequencies, so every ship in the system could hear it. "All units, this is Solar Command. Target confirmation complete. Enemy fleet composition analyzed. All ships are authorized to engage at will." The human response was immediate. 8,000 warships suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, racing toward the Devourer fleet like bullets fired from a gun. Energy signatures spiked as weapon systems activated. The space between the two fleets began to fill with the bright trails of missiles and energy beams. "This is madness," General Krex said. "They're going to be slaughtered." But Zephyrian was beginning to suspect something else entirely. The way the humans moved, the confidence in their communications, the hidden bases and advanced technology. None of it fit with the primitive species they thought they knew. "Clinda," he said slowly, "how long have the humans had faster-than-light travel?" "According to our records, they achieved their first FTL flight about 50 years ago. Very crude technology, barely faster than our emergency shuttles." "And when was our last detailed survey of human space?" Clinda checked her database. 47 years ago, sir. We've been monitoring their radio signal since then, but no direct observation." Zephyrian felt a chill run down his spine. 47 years. In galactic terms, that was barely a moment. But for a rapidly developing species like humanity, it could be enough time for incredible changes. Pull up the historical records, he ordered. I want to know everything we have about human behavior patterns, their psychology, their evolutionary background. As the first human weapons struck the outer edge of the Devourer fleet, Zephyrian began to read the old reports about humanity. What he found made him realize that the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed humans were just another primitive species waiting to join galactic civilization. But the old reports painted a very different picture. Humans were persistence hunters, apex predators, a species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain not through strength or speed, but through intelligence, cooperation, an absolute refusal to give up. The first Devourer bioship exploded in a burst of organic matter and dark energy. Then a second. Then a third. Impossible, whispered Counselor Vex. Nothing can. The Ambassador Zephyrian watched in complete disbelief as the human fleet did something that broke every rule of civilized space warfare. The human ships didn't maintain safe distances like proper military vessels. They didn't exchange polite volleys of energy weapons from thousands of kilometers away. Instead, they flew straight at the Devourer bioships and rammed into them at speeds that should have destroyed both vessels. But somehow, the human ships survived the impacts while the Devourers didn't. How are they still intact? Demanded General Krex, pointing at the display showing a human destroyer that had just punched through the hull of a bioship 10 times its size. Those collision forces should have turned that ship into metal paste. Sensor Officer Clinda worked frantically at her controls, trying to understand what they were seeing. The human ships appear to have some kind of reinforced bow section designed specifically for ramming attacks. But that's not the strangest part. She highlighted several smaller signals on the screen. After impact, the human crews are abandoning their ships. But they're not fleeing. They're going inside the Devourer vessels. Counselor Vex, already cracked from stress, began to fracture further. Inside, that's suicide. The interior of Devourer ships is full of digestive acids and biological weapons. No one can survive in there. But the sensors told a different story. Human life signs were moving through the bioships, somehow staying alive in conditions that would kill any known species within seconds. Sir, Clinda called out, her voice filled with confusion. I'm detecting explosions inside the Devourer vessels. Small ones, but happening in very specific locations. On the main display, one of the massive bioships began to convulse. Its tentacles stopped moving. The organic weapons growing from its sides went dark. Then, with a sound that carried across space despite the vacuum, the creature ship let out what could only be described as a death scream. The bioship went completely still, floating dead in space. Moments later, human fighters emerged from holes burned through its hull, flying toward the next target. Impossible, whispered General Krex. They killed it from the inside. Zephyrian activated his communication system with shaking hands. He had to contact Admiral Chun and find out how this was possible. Human Command, this is Ambassador Zephyrian. Your tactics are unprecedented. How are your soldiers surviving inside those vessels? Admiral Chun's response was calm and professional, as if discussing the weather. Ambassador, our Marines are equipped with environmental suits designed for extreme hostile environments. The Devourer bioships are dangerous, but no more so than the deepest ocean trenches on our world. The digestive acids are strongly acidic, yes. Our suits can handle that for about 30 minutes, which is more than enough time to locate and destroy the creature's nervous system. Zephyrian felt his world turning upside down. You're treating those ships like animals to be hunted, not spacecraft to be fought. Because that's what they are, Ambassador. They're predators, but so are we. And we're better at it. The communication ended just as another Devourer bioship died. This one cut apart by what appeared to be human soldiers using some kind of molecular cutting tools. The massive creature tried to defend itself by releasing clouds of poisonous gas. But the human attackers simply ignored the chemical weapons and continued their work. "This can't be happening," muttered Counselor Vex. "The Devourers are the ultimate apex predators. They've consumed entire galaxies. Maybe they were apex predators in their old hunting grounds," said General Krex slowly. "But they've never encountered humans before." More explosions lit up space as human tactics proved devastatingly effective. The humans didn't fight like any civilization the Council had ever seen. They used weapons that seemed designed to cause pain rather than just destruction. They targeted the bioship's sensory organs, nervous systems, and what appeared to be emotional centers. The Devourer fleet, which had advanced steadily for the past day, suddenly stopped moving forward. Some of the bioships began to turn around, trying to retreat toward the outer edges of the system. "They're running," Clintus said in amazement. "The Devourers are actually retreating." But the human fleet wasn't letting them escape. The faster human vessels moved to cut off the retreat, while the larger warships continued their systematic destruction of the bioships. Zephyrian tried to contact Admiral Chun again. "Human Command, the enemy is retreating. You've won. There's no need to continue the slaughter." This time, Chun's response was colder. "Ambassador, these creatures have destroyed entire civilizations. If we let them escape, they'll just find another galaxy to consume. That's not winning. That's postponing the problem. What are you saying?" "I'm saying we don't take prisoners, and we don't leave threats alive to attack others. We finish what we start." The systematic destruction of the Devourer fleet continued for the next 18 hours. The humans showed no mercy, no hesitation, and no sign of fatigue. Their ships seemed to have unlimited ammunition and energy. When weapons were damaged, they were quickly repaired with parts scavenged from destroyed enemies. "Sir," Clinda reported, "I'm detecting something unusual about the human casualties." "What do you mean?" "According to sensors, approximately 37 human ships have been destroyed in the fighting. But I'm tracking 42 human vessels that were previously listed as destroyed. They appear to have been rebuilt using Devourer biotechnology." Zephyrian stared at the display. Sure enough, some of the human ships now had organic components grafted onto their metal hulls. They were using their enemy's own biology against them, adapting and improving their technology in real time during battle. "How are they doing that so quickly?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. But it appears human technology is far more modular and adaptable than we realized. They can integrate alien systems faster than our best engineers could analyze them." A new alarm sounded as the sensors detected something else. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the outer system. Something big is coming through the dark space portal." The display zoomed out to show what was approaching. It was another Devourer fleet, this one even larger than the first. Hundreds of thousands of bioships were emerging from dark space, apparently responding to distress calls from the original fleet. "Reinforcements," said General Krex grimly. "The humans fought well, but this new fleet will overwhelm them completely." But Admiral Chun's response to the news was not what anyone expected. "All units, be advised that additional targets are approaching from dark space. Estimated time to engagement, 4 hours. Use the time to resupply and repair." "Targets?" Zephyrian couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Admiral, that's a fleet 10 times larger than what you just fought. Even if you could defeat them, you'd lose everything." "Ambassador," Chun replied calmly, "you're thinking like prey. We don't see a larger fleet as a bigger threat. We see it as a target-rich environment." As if to emphasize the point, the human fleet began to reorganize itself. Ships that had been damaged were quickly repaired. New vessels emerged from hidden bases throughout the solar system, including some that were significantly larger than anything they had seen before. "Where do they keep getting more ships?" demanded Counselor Vex. Clinda checked her deep-range sensors. "Sir, I'm detecting industrial activity on nearly every solid body in the solar system. The humans have been building ships non-stop for decades. Mars alone has 7 major shipyards operating at full capacity. For how long? Based on the construction patterns, at least 45 years. Since right around the time they achieved faster than light travel." Zephyrian felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. They've been preparing for this. Not just for the Devourers, but for any major threat to their species. They've turned their entire solar system into a fortress. But how did they know the Devourers would come here? Asked General Krax. "Maybe they didn't," Zephyrian said slowly. "Maybe they just assumed that something would eventually try to destroy them. And they decided to be ready for anything." The second Devourer fleet was now entering the outer solar system, their massive bioships blotting out even more stars. But instead of feeling fear, Zephyrian found himself watching the human fleet with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans weren't running. They weren't calling for help. They weren't even particularly concerned. They were just calmly preparing to do to this larger fleet exactly what they had done to the first one. "Counselors," he said quietly, "I think we need to seriously reconsider everything we know about humanity." As the second battle began, with human ships once again charging directly into enemy formations, using tactics that defied all military logic, Zephyrian realized that the galaxy's understanding of space warfare was about to change forever. The Devourers had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that treated overwhelming force as just another tactical challenge to solve. They had certainly never met a species that considered being outnumbered to be an advantage rather than a problem. "Sir," Clinda whispered, "I don't think the humans are just fighting for their planet. I think they're fighting for sport." The second Devourer fleet was dying even faster than the first. Ambassador Zephyrian watched the tactical display with growing alarm as human ships systematically destroyed biovessels that should have been impossible to kill. But what truly terrified him wasn't the human victory. It was what the deep space sensors were now revealing about the galaxy itself. "Sir," Sensor Officer Clinda said, her voice shaking, "you need to see this. I've been running extended scans while monitoring the battle, and I'm detecting anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" Zephyrian asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "Human energy signatures, sir. Hundreds of them. Throughout the galaxy." The main display shifted from the Battle in Sol system to a galactic map. Tiny red dots began appearing across the spiral arms, each one representing a human presence. As more data came in, more dots appeared. Then more. Then thousands more. General Krex stepped closer to the display, his reptilian features twisted in disbelief. "That can't be right. Humans only achieved interstellar flight 50 years ago. They couldn't possibly have spread this far." "Check the data again," ordered Counselor Vex, his crystalline body now completely covered in stress fractures. Clinda worked at her controls for several minutes, running verification protocols and cross-referencing with historical surveys. "The data is accurate, sir. Human settlements exist in every major star system, within 500 light-years of Earth. Many of them appear to be fully militarized colonies with shipyards and defensive installations. But we would have detected them," Zephyrian protested. "Our survey ships monitor all inhabited systems." "Actually, sir," Clinda said quietly, "looking at our survey logs, we have detected them. We just classified them as minor indigenous settlements or primitive mining operations and ignored them." The terrible truth began to sink in. For decades, The Galactic Council had been dismissing human colonies as unimportant local populations. They had seen what they expected to see: primitive settlements that would take centuries to become relevant. They had never looked closely enough to realize these settlements were actually advanced military outposts. "Show me the closest human colony to Council space," Zephyrian demanded. A new image appeared on the display. It showed what their records listed as a small mining settlement in the Kepler system. But the current sensor data revealed the truth. The settlement was actually a massive military complex with orbital shipyards, offensive platforms, and what appeared to be a fleet of warships hidden behind the system's largest moon. "How long has that been there?" asked General Krex. "According to our records, 23 years. We last surveyed it 18 years ago and classified it as no strategic value." More data flowed in as their deep space sensor network updated. Human colonies weren't just scattered randomly through space. They formed a carefully planned network, with each settlement positioned to support the others. Communication relays, supply lines, mutual defense pacts. It was a galactic infrastructure that had been built quietly and efficiently while the Council wasn't paying attention. "They've been planning this for decades," Zephyrian whispered. "Not just preparing for the Devourers, but for any threat to their species." "Sir," Clinda called out urgently, "I'm detecting new activity from the human colonies. They're mobilizing." The galactic map updated again, showing movement from hundreds of human settlements. Ships were launching, fleets were forming, and communication traffic was spiking between colonies. Zephyrian opened a communication channel to Admiral Chun. "Human Command. We're detecting military activity from your colonies throughout the galaxy. What are you mobilizing for?" Chen's response was immediate. "Ambassador, we've confirmed that the Devourer threat extends beyond the Sol system. Our colonies are implementing standard threat response protocols." "Standard protocols?" "Every human settlement is required to maintain sufficient military capability to defend itself and provide support to other colonies if needed. We're coordinating a galaxy-wide response to ensure the Devourer threat is completely eliminated." The implications hit Zephyrian like a physical blow. The humans weren't just fighting to defend Earth. They were preparing to hunt down and exterminate the Devourers throughout the entire galaxy. "Sir," Clinda reported, "long-range sensors are detecting Devourer activity in 7 other star systems. Bioship signatures matching the fleet we encountered." "And the human response?" "Human fleets are already moving toward all 7 systems. Estimated arrival times suggest they've been tracking these Devourer groups for some time." General Krex turned away from the display, his scales pale with shock. "They've been watching us. All of us. They know where every threat in the galaxy is located, and they've been quietly positioning themselves to deal with those threats." The battle in Sol System was now nearly over. The second Devourer fleet had been reduced to scattered wreckage, with human ships hunting down the few survivors. But instead of celebrating victory, the human fleet immediately began organizing for departure. "Admiral Chun," Zephyrian called, "where are your ships going now?" "Dark space, Ambassador. We're following the Devourer retreat path back to their source. Can't risk them regrouping for another attack." "That's impossible. No one has ever successfully navigated dark space. We've been mapping dark space routes for 30 years, Ambassador. The Devourers aren't the only things that use those pathways." Another shocking revelation. The humans have been exploring the spaces between galaxies, the void that even the most advanced civilizations avoided. They had been mapping routes, studying threats, and preparing for dangers the Council didn't even know existed. "How?" Zephyrian asked weakly. "How did you accomplish all this without anyone noticing?" Admiral Chun's response was patient, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Ambassador, we noticed that galactic civilization tends to ignore species they consider primitive. So we let you keep considering as primitive, while we prepared for the threats you were either unwilling or unable to face. The communication ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Representatives from hundreds of species stared at the displays, showing the true scope of human expansion and preparation. The primitives they had dismissed had quietly become the galaxy's most capable military force. "Sir," Clinda whispered, "there's more. I'm detecting massive energy signatures in dark space itself. Something huge is moving." The display zoomed out even further, showing the spaces between galaxies. Dark space had always appeared empty on sensors, just void between the spiral arms. But now, with the sensors specifically tuned to detect human signatures, they could see the truth. Dark space wasn't empty. It was full of human installations, research stations, early warning systems, and what appeared to be massive military bases positioned at strategic points throughout the void. The humans had turned dark space itself into a defensive network. "How long have they been out there?" asked Counselor Vex. "Unknown, sir. But based on the size and complexity of these installations, at least 20 years. Possibly longer. And we never detected any of this." "We never looked, sir. Our surveys focused on inhabited star systems. We never thought to scan empty space." Zephyrian realized the full extent of their blindness. While the Galactic Council had been focused on politics and trade between established civilizations, humanity had been quietly exploring every corner of the galaxy. They had found threats the Council didn't know existed and built defenses against dangers they couldn't imagine. "Sir," Clinda said, her voice barely audible, "I'm receiving reports from our monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Human fleets are engaging Devour forces in 17 different systems simultaneously." The reports that followed painted a picture of coordinated military action on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Human forces weren't just responding to threats. They were systematically hunting down and destroying every Devour presence they could find in the Vega system. A human fleet had arrived before the Devourers could consume the local planet, driving them off with minimal losses. In the Arcturus sector, human forces had cornered a Devourer scouting group and wiped them out completely. Near the galactic core, human ships were pursuing fleeing biovessels into dark space, ensuring none escaped to threaten other worlds. "They're not just fighting," Zephyrian realized. "They're exterminating. They're making sure this threat can never return." "Sir," Clinda reported, "Admiral Chen is requesting communication. Put him through." Chen's voice filled the chamber, calm and professional as always. "Ambassador, I wanted to inform the Council that the immediate Devourer threat has been neutralized. Our forces are now conducting mop-up operations to ensure no survivors remain." "Admiral," Zephyrian said slowly, "we need to discuss the situation." "There are many questions." "Of course, Ambassador. I'll be happy to meet with Council representatives once our current operations are complete. I should mention that we've also identified and begun eliminating several other galactic threats that you may not be aware of." "Other threats?" "The Void Seekers in the Outer Rim, the plague ships near the galactic core, and what appears to be a dormant Devourer hive in the Magellanic Clouds. Nothing you need to worry about. We'll handle it." The communication ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't just prepared to defend themselves from one threat. 3 weeks after the last Devourer bioship had been destroyed, the Galactic Council convened for what many believed would be the most important session in galactic history. The chamber looked the same as always, with representatives from hundreds of species gathered in their assigned seats. But everything else had changed. The balance of power that had existed for thousands of years was gone, replaced by a new reality that no one was quite sure how to handle. Ambassador Zephyrian stood at the central podium. But for the first time in his career, he wasn't the most important person in the room. That honor belonged to Admiral Chun of Earth's Solar Defense Force, who sat calmly at what had once been the Observers section, reserved for primitive species. "The Council recognizes Admiral Chun," Zephyrian announced, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. Chun stood and walked to the podium with the easy confidence of someone who held all the cards. He was surprisingly ordinary-looking, average height, middle-aged, with the kind of face you might see anywhere in human space. But everyone in the chamber knew they were looking at the representative of the galaxy's new apex predators. "Thank you, Ambassador," Chun said politely. "I wanted to address some of the concerns that have been raised about recent events." Recent events. That was one way to describe the complete extermination of the galaxy's most feared enemy, and the revelation that humanity had been secretly preparing for galactic domination for decades. First, Chun continued, "I want to assure the Council that Earth has no interest in conquering or controlling other species. We're not empire builders. We're problem solvers." General Krex, his reptilian features tense with barely controlled fear, spoke from his seat. "Admiral, your forces have eliminated 17 different threats across the galaxy in the past 3 weeks. Some of those threats were unknown to us, but others were issues the Council was handling through diplomatic channels." Chun nodded. "I assume you're referring to the Pirate Confederacy in the Outer Rim and the slaver cartels near the galactic core. Those were complex political situations that required careful negotiation." Krex insisted. "You simply destroyed them because negotiation wasn't working," Chun replied calmly. "The Pirate Confederacy had been raiding shipping lanes for 70 years while the Confederate Confederacy had been raiding shipping lanes for 70 years while the Pirate Confederacy Council held meetings about possible responses. The slaver cartels had enslaved millions of beings while you debated the proper diplomatic protocols. These weren't political problems. They were threats that needed to be eliminated." Councillor Vex, his crystalline body still cracked from stress, spoke up. "But who gave you the authority to make those decisions?" "The Council exists to maintain galactic order through cooperation and consensus." "And how well was that working?" Chun asked. "The Devourers were approaching Earth for weeks before the Council even managed to agree on an evacuation plan. If humanity had followed Council protocols, my entire species would be extinct right now." The chamber fell silent. No one could argue with that point. "Admiral," said Ambassador Mylena of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance, "we understand that humanity feels the need for self-defense. But your actions suggest something far beyond simple defense. You've built a military infrastructure that spans the entire galaxy." "Yes," Chun agreed. "We have. Why?" Mylena pressed. "What are your intentions?" Chun activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Human settlements were marked in blue, forming a network that connected every major star system. Council worlds were marked in green, scattered throughout human space like islands in an ocean. "Our intentions," Chun said, "are to ensure that threats like the Devourers can never again come close to destroying galactic civilization. We've spent 50 years identifying every possible danger, from ancient sleeper fleets to dimensional parasites to things you don't have names for yet." The display updated to show threat assessments throughout the galaxy. Red markers appeared in dozens of locations, each representing a potential danger that the Council had never detected. "The galaxy is not a safe place," Chun continued. "It's full of predators, parasites, and ancient weapons left behind by civilizations that made the same mistake you've been making." "What mistake?" asked Zephyrian. "Thinking that civilization means being civilized," Chun replied. "Thinking that if you're peaceful and diplomatic and cooperative, the universe will leave you alone. The universe doesn't care about your good intentions. It only understands strength." General Krex stood up angrily. Are you saying that thousands of years of galactic cooperation have been worthless? I'm saying they've been possible because someone was finally willing to deal with the threats you've been ignoring, Chun answered. You've had thousands of years of peace because the dangerous species either killed themselves off or retreated to the dark spaces. But they were always out there, growing stronger, waiting for the right moment to return. Counselor Vex gestured to the display. And you appointed yourselves as the galaxy's protectors? No, Chun said. We appointed ourselves as the galaxy's immune system. Protectors try to shield you from danger. We eliminate danger before it can reach you. The distinction was subtle but important. Protectors could be argued with, reasoned with, convinced to change their methods. An immune system simply destroyed threats without asking permission or explaining its actions. What do you want from the Council? Asked Ambassador Milena. Nothing, Chun replied. You can continue governing your member worlds however you like. Trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange, all of that can remain exactly as it was. We have no interest in interfering with internal galactic politics. Then, what's changed? Demanded General Krex. Chum smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It wasn't a pleasant expression. What's changed is that you now live under our protection, whether you want it or not. Any major threat to galactic civilization will be dealt with by human forces using human methods. You don't get to vote on it, negotiate with it, or delay it with committee meetings. The implications sank in slowly. The Galactic Council could continue to exist, but only because humanity allowed it. They could make decisions, but only about matters humanity considered unimportant. The moment a real threat appeared, human forces would take control. And if we refuse this arrangement? Asked Counselor Vex. Chun's expression didn't change. Then you'll discover why every threat in the galaxy fears us more than they fear you. The threat was delivered so calmly and politely that it took several seconds for its full meaning to register. Humanity wasn't asking for permission to be the galaxy's dominant species. They were informing the Council that they already were. Admiral, Zephyrian said carefully, surely there's room for compromise. The Council has governed the galaxy successfully for thousands of years. Our experience and diplomatic knowledge could be valuable to your protection efforts. Actually, you're right, Chun said, surprising everyone. We could use your help with something. Hope flickered in the chamber. Perhaps humans could be reasoned with after all. We're planning an expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy, Chun continued. Our deep space sensors have detected several potential threats there that could eventually pose a danger to this galaxy. We could use the Council's help with logistics and coordination. The hope died quickly. Humans weren't asking for help governing the galaxy. They were asking for help hunting threats in other galaxies. How? How many of you are there? Whispered Ambassador Milena. Classified, Chun replied. But enough to handle any conceivable threat. And your technology? Also classified. But you've seen it in action. Sensor Officer Clinda, who had been monitoring the conversation from her station, raised a trembling hand. Admiral, if I may ask, how long have you been planning this? Chun considered the question for a moment. Since our first contact with galactic civilization, we realized immediately that the Council's approach to threats was inadequate. Too slow, too cautious, too willing to compromise with things that should be destroyed. We decided to develop our own approach. And if we hadn't discovered your capabilities during the Devourer crisis? Asked Zephyrian. You would have continued living in a safe galaxy without knowing why it was safe, Chun answered. We prefer working in the background. Direct intervention is messy and causes political complications. Like this meeting, General Krex said grimly. Exactly. But the Devourer threat was too large to handle quietly, so here we are. Chun activated another display, this one showing human exploration vessels disappearing into dark space. Our ships are currently pursuing the remaining Devourer forces to their home galaxy. We expect to eliminate the threat completely within 6 months. Their home galaxy? Counselor Vex's voice cracked with shock. You're following them home? Of course. You don't solve a pest problem by just killing the ones in your house. You have to eliminate the nest. The casual way, Chun. Discuss the extermination of an entire species in another galaxy made it clear that humanity's definition of necessary action was very different from the Council's. Admiral, Zephyrian said slowly, what happens to species that oppose your protection? Chun's smile returned. That depends on why they oppose it. Species that simply don't want our help are free to decline it, as long as they can handle their own threats without endangering others. Species that actively try to prevent us from eliminating galaxy-level threats